Welcome to the Gender in Focus podcast. I'm Elle, and each week I get to ask Kai Scott, the president of Transfocus Consulting, all the questions you have ever wanted to ask about trans and non-binary people in the workplace and in the wider world.
If people aren't aware, especially in early days of coming out, we misgender ourselves, right? And not to give license to, just willy-nilly misgendering, right? We do want to be thoughtful, but there is something to be said about there is a time period for adjustment, and there's space for practicing, and part of that is making mistakes as a way to improve. Yeah.
Everything that you've said then so far is kind of alluding to the idea that allyship is a skill that is learned as opposed to an identity that's claimed, right? And so it's a continuous learning journey.
Welcome to today's episode, designed especially for aspiring allies, people who want to show up, speak up, and grow. If you've ever wondered, where do I start? How do I avoid doing harm? Or what does real support for trans and non-binary people actually look like? You're in the right place. This isn't about perfection. It's about learning, practicing, and building a foundation that makes allyship feel natural, not stressful. So I'm really excited to dig into this topic with my esteemed colleague, Elle. How are you doing today?
I am great, Kai. How are you doing?
I'm doing fantastic. Yeah. I am always really touched by people who are starting their journey of allyship and, are curious, maybe a little hesitant, wondering what to do, maybe a little lost even. And so that's why we were inspired to do this session here today. So I'm excited to unpack it with you.
Me too. And I guess that's a pretty good place to start, which is, where do I even begin? If you're an aspiring ally and you know this is something you care about, but you're just like, oh, I don't even know where to start here. Where is that? Please tell us.
Absolutely. I think it's really helpful if people, there's kind of two things. If you have a personal touch point on this topic of gender diversity, maybe a coworker just came out to you as trans, or you have a family member or a friend or somebody at church, wherever that person has, shared more about themselves. That's like a really wonderful starting point. And there's a mixture of things you can do if that's the case. And then also share if you don't know somebody directly. Maybe they've not shared, because usually there is somebody in people's lives they just don't know, right? And so what are ways that you can show up even if you don't know somebody is trans? Right. So we'll start with somebody, and maybe it's a recent thing and maybe a bit nerve-wracking because it's maybe out of left field and like, holy crap, what just happened? So I can definitely acknowledge those feelings. And then it really is about having conversations with that individual, but also doing your own work as well. Not over relying on that one person for all the knowledge or all the information, and certainly going to wherever your interest lies. I think that's always a good place to start. It's not the end all be all, but it certainly is helpful if you're wondering, how do I navigate pronouns, or how do I practice this new first name that, I've known this person by another name and now they're going to go by this name. And you're just wondering the practicalities of that, right? Okay, cool. Maybe you find somewhere in what you read or in videos that you watch on YouTube, or by listening to this episode here, you can get those clues and say, for example, like a sticky note on your window mirror, or on your what's it called, fridge in the kitchen, so anytime you pass by, you see that name and you say it. Things like that can be really helpful. People are curious about broader issues. They're kind of timely topics happening right now, and it is helpful to read articles on those topics to become aware of what is, misinformation versus correct information. If we're thinking about gender affirming care and those kinds of topics. So it's kind of wherever your curiosity is. I think that's a great place to start. And then really having an open conversation if the person in your life who is trans wants to have that. That's always good to have an open-ended question, not kind of wanting to learn more about their experience and their
Hmm.
understanding. If you don't know somebody trans in your life, then I think a similar thing applies of going with what you're interested in. And usually along the way, you see other things that might pique
Right.
your
Yeah.
curiosity and be like, oh, okay, I'll explore this too. And then just it's a kind of a snowball effect. The momentum gathers and you learn more.
Hmm. So it's a sort of build your own journey as opposed to there
Mhm.
are these exact steps you must take in order to be an ally.
No, I absolutely agree with that. That's such an important thing. I think people think there's like this imaginary checklist of
Right.
exactly what to say and what to do and not do, and a script maybe. I have had
Mm.
people, and I totally understand this. They've asked for
That's
scripts, you know?
that's cute. That's
It
not to be
is.
patronizing, but that's sweet.
No. You know what? I used to do the same. I grew up in Germany, and when I was just learning the language as a young child, I got so nervous going on the phone that I planned out my whole conversation. I mean, you can't, right? It's not possible. But
Right.
I learned very quickly after the second question that they asked that I was totally doomed because I didn't plan for all the things. But so I can appreciate the desire for a script to have certainty. But really, it's just about having, some amount of knowledge, stepping into a bit of an unknown, and then working with the person or the people and finding your way to deeper levels of knowledge. Of course, that goes for any topic, but I think especially for something as something that people generally don't have a great understanding of when it comes to
Mhm.
gender diversity.
Mhm. The next thing I wanted to ask is a sort of common theme that I see, at least on social media, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of too, which is this real fear of making a big mistake and getting something wrong and really hurting someone's feelings, or just finding yourself in a situation that you really didn't mean to get yourself into. And so I was wondering if you have some advice for people at the start of their journey who are just a bit unsure of that.
Yeah, that's such a big one. That's, I would say, among the top three
Hmm.
things that people bring up. It's coming from a really good place. People want to be kind, considerate, understanding towards others, and they realize they don't know everything. And so that in of itself almost makes them hold back a bit because they're like, I
Right.
just don't want to step on somebody's toes, tails, whatever, right? Just like,
Hmm.
uh, and hurt anybody. And I get that inclination. I have
Yeah,
that
for
on
sure.
other topics, right? Like,
Me
I'm
too.
sure you do too, right?
Yeah,
Just like,
absolutely. Yeah.
just like terrified, biting your nails,
Hmm.
just hoping that nobody, if you find yourself having made a mistake and you're aware of it, you're just like, oh, I hope nobody heard that. That's another common one. Just like tiptoe past it.
Yeah. Right.
So it's totally understandable. It is a new topic. And this goes for not just complex topics like this one. This goes if you're learning a new language, a new skill, a new anything, you're just feeling really awkward. And
Hmm.
especially if we're older, I find this as in my mid 40s. Sometimes people are a bit surprised when I say that, but mid 40s, big reveal here. And I find that I should have competencies already around this. Like I kind of blame and shame myself.
Hmm.
Um, and the further I am away from having learned something, the more awkward it is to do it. Right. And so
Right. Yeah.
there's like the kind of self talk piece. And then there's also I haven't been in a learning situation in a long time. And now I'm having to really face that. And
Hmm.
so when it comes to that, what I would advise is that really, especially we've done a lot of research among trans and non-binary folks, and the thing we hear over and over is not so much that a mistake is made, it's how people handle it after the fact.
Right.
So if you acknowledge it, right, and make a correction, so not do my method of tiptoeing past it, just be like, oh, if it's misgendering, using the incorrect pronoun for somebody, it's like, my bad, I meant she, and then carry on, right? If it's other things, you can apologize and be like, I'm really genuinely sorry. is there anything I can do to address the impact I've had on you, right? So it's very genuine. It's an open question. It'll be different for, each person. So, but you can absolutely correct and mend these things. This is
Mhm.
not like something that happens and then you're forever banished to the sidelines. Like
Right.
that generally doesn't happen. Many trans and non-binary folks have space. It's not to say that it doesn't have an impact on them. It does
Mhm.
uh, many times, but there's space to work with people. In fact, they really appreciate when people show up and want to do better. Right? That
Right.
that
Yeah.
putting in the effort, taking it seriously, that really is very meaningful to a lot of trans and non-binary folks.
Mhm. I will also say that, like, whether it's on other topics, but also on this topic too, trans and non-binary people also get things wrong. It's not
Oh
that
yeah,
it's not
absolutely.
that you as a cis person who wants to be an ally are the only person making mistakes. So
Yeah.
I think if you can approach it like it's a human thing that we do
Mhm.
this and we can try our best and that's it. But yeah, it's trans and non-binary people make mistakes all the time. So
Oh yeah, and
it's okay.
interestingly, if people aren't aware, especially in early days of coming out, we misgender ourselves, right? And not to
Yes.
give license to just willy nilly misgendering, right? We do want to be thoughtful, but there is something to be said about there is a time period for adjustment, and
Hmm.
there's space for practicing, and part of that is making mistakes as a way to
Hmm.
improve. Yeah.
Hmm. What does allyship look like then? Because if you're saying that there's no sort of checklist and it's okay
Mhm.
to make mistakes, or obviously we're trying not to make mistakes, but when they happen, it's kind of how we handle it. But on a sort of overall picture, what's the difference between just having supportive views versus actually being an ally?
Yeah. For me, it's more of a posture that you're wanting to learn and grow. You're
Hmm.
curious in a way that is responsive, or, if you're curious towards a person, making sure it's, adjusted to what they're wanting to share.
Hmm.
uh, and also there's a bit of connecting with others, but then also doing one's own work. There's a degree of humility that comes with allyship as well. The fact that I don't know everything, but
Hmm.
I'm not going to let not knowing very much hinder me from jumping in and
Right.
being a part of, right? In other communities where I am an ally, I show up even if I don't have all the information.
Hmm.
I'll ask careful questions along the way. I'll try to do something and then kind of read the room to see the responses, um, and try to do better next time if there's an adjustment needed, right? But it's this kind of iterative cycle of learning something, trying something, listening, and then having that feedback loop. So it's this continuous thing that happens,
Hmm.
and with those variables, often people can really see the intention with which you're coming. You don't need to advertise it really strongly either, right? Sometimes people are
Right.
like, I come with good intentions, almost like lots of white flags flying. Um,
Hmm.
just be very kind of matter of fact and present. And that can go a long way. And people really realize. But I think the key thing is showing up.
Hmm.
So many people would want something a little bit more passive, but I do
Right.
encourage folks to be active.
Hmm.
And that might mean going outside of a comfort zone that we're not used to in the ways I
Hmm.
described before. So, but that active piece, it could be going to events that are open to the public. It could be volunteering in some way with Pride or other Trans Day of Remembrance. It can mean practicing somebody's name and really getting that and being very intentional about it. So these are small things, but they actually translate into big meaningful things for people.
Right.
But they are active.
When there is so much misinformation out there regarding trans issues, and there's sort of there's quite a lot of noise and there's quite a lot of differing opinions. When you're just sort of getting started, it can be
Mm,
really hard to know who to listen to or where to find
right.
information that is actually correct. And so, where can allies go to learn sort of trustworthy
Mhm.
information about trans people and non-binary people?
Yeah. That's a really important question. You're right that it is so difficult sometimes, especially quick consumption on social
Mm,
media. It's like you're flipping through and you're like, is that true? You know, and you're like,
right.
you wonder, you're like, I don't know. It sounds right,
Hmm.
kind of, but maybe there's more to it. So you're kind of perpetually wondering. And, you know, depending on the media source, there can be added layers there, not to go too far into media literacy on that
Hmm.
front, but just being aware that even major newspapers or news sources may not 100% get things dialed on trans and non binary folks. So it's not to say you don't consume that, but just more be kind of curious about, okay, they're saying this, but maybe there's more to the story.
Right.
And, you know, looking further afield. Generally, if you have curiosity about people's trans and non binary people's lives, there's tons of content generated by trans and non binary folks. So,
Yeah.
direct source, always a really good insight into people's lived everyday experiences, whether it's on
Hmm.
YouTube, Substack, social media. Obviously, we have a whole social media line, and with this podcast as well. So we're trying to, you know, increase that understanding on all kinds of different topics. You know, a lot of it is workplace focused, but you know, that you can there are now trans and non-binary journalists, right? So they're also generating you know, content and information specific to these issues. And so I think those are really important sources, along with evidence-based research too.
Right.
So of course that has a little bit added layer, because there is research out there that can be a bit questionable, um, especially if it doesn't involve any trans people at all.
Hmm.
That's usually a bit of a flag that there's something
Right.
going on. And so, but certainly if it's involving trans and non-binary folks and surveying them, or focus groups, or any other sort of data collection to better understand. There, here in Canada, at least, the government generated research is often high quality and
Hmm.
can reveal a lot of really important insights there. One big one I'll flag just as a really powerful resource is really simple title. We are allies.ca. It is a Health Canada funded national campaign here in Canada, with storytelling videos and a whole bunch of really great content on the lived experiences of folks, especially when it comes to gender affirming care. So that's just
Mm,
one I'll plug specifically.
great. Everything that you've said then so far is kind of alluding to the idea that allyship is a skill that is learned as opposed to um, an identity that's claimed,
Mm.
right? And so it's a continuous learning journey. And what is some general advice for developing any skill?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. This is all about developing a skill, and any skill, there's things that can contribute to that skill development, and then things that detract from it. What I find is, in my allyship journey with other groups, is having fun. And I know that sounds
Mm,
counterintuitive because we're taking it very seriously, but
right.
sometimes that seriousness can be so heavy. And so,
Hmm.
you know, just being like, you know what, this is an ongoing thing. We have time, even if maybe outside events, we don't need to name
Right.
them or make them feel very urgent, and they are.
Hmm.
But we can still enjoy the process,
Hmm.
and just really lean into it. And, you know, that exploration and curiosity can really drive, you know, many twists and turns. And what we find in the allies that we've talked to is that they learn about themselves as well
Hmm.
along the way. And there's like these beautiful little gifts that they get along with helping trans and non binary folks. So it's this kind of win win that I just encourage folks that maybe are feeling pretty hesitant, that these are some of the rewards of that. And
Mm.
not to say you have to have personal reward to go on this journey, but it's a nice cherry on the top of a
Of course.
much larger cake. So just saying, you know, it's not about perfection. You can learn along the way. There'll be support along the way as
Hmm.
well. And that this will make a huge difference in trans and non binary people's lives if you're there showing up for that journey. And we've got a lot of specifics as well. I know people really want, they crave the specifics to kind of help with some of that uncertainty that they feel. And we
Hmm.
certainly have tons of that here in our podcast, which I invite you to listen to, and a ton of other resources that you can access to help, along with tons of other places where you can go to extend that learning. And of course, hope and wish for a lot of insight along the way for folks who do that.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much, Kai.
Well, really lovely. And thank you for the great conversation. And bye for now.
See you. Bye.